I decided I wanted to enroll in business school at Wharton because I recognized that some of the biggest challenges in the way of progress for Castleman disease were actually systemic and managerial problems. So I enrolled in business school, and shortly thereafter, I had my 5th deadly relapse. So for the 5th time, I nearly died, and for the 5th time, I needed multi-agent chemotherapy to save my life. We don't have any pictures from that hospitalization because it was such a scary time, and we just didn't even know if I would make it. But you can see this photo from a few weeks later at my wife and I's engagement party. In between, I had nearly died in between these photos, and there I was, having failed to respond to any drug that had ever been tried for my disease, and even weekly chemotherapy could not prevent a relapse. I knew that if I wanted to make it to May 24th, 2014, which was our wedding date, that I would need to identify a treatment that could keep me alive. And so let me frame the problem that I was facing at this stage. So in Castleman disease, we know that the immune system becomes hyperactivated. We don't know why it becomes hyperactivated. We don't know which immune cell types are really the problems in idiopathic MCD. We don't know what key signaling pathways are causing problems in Castleman's, and we don't know the cytokines that are driving the cytokine storm. So there's hundreds of different cell types, hundreds of different signaling pathways, and hundreds of different cytokines that could all be the problem in Castleman disease, none of which we actually knew. And my task was to identify one of those things that maybe we could target with a drug so that I could make it to May 24th, 2014. And so fortunately, I'd been running cytokine panels on my blood every month leading up to my last relapse. And in those cytokine panels, we were able to find a couple trends. So there was a protein called VEGF, or vascular endothelial growth factor, that's critical for blood vessel development. That was very elevated early on leading up to my relapse. And another protein produced by activated T cells was also an early riser leading up to my relapse. I also measured 1,300 different proteins in my blood doing serum proteomics and was able to confirm that, in fact, those 2 proteins from our cytokine panels were also 2 of the most elevated proteins when we expanded our panel. I also had blood samples for myself. I ran flow cytometry to confirm that, in fact, there were activated T cells in my blood during my relapses. And my clinical data was consistent with what we were seeing in the lab. So my data was corroborative with those blood moles that I told you about, with the increased blood vessels in my lymph nodes. So this kind of fit together that maybe VEGF and T cell activation, that these were critical to my disease. So we wondered, is there something common to both T cell activation and also VEGF expression that maybe we could target with a drug that could save my life? So we turned back to the proteomics data, and we did pathway analyses on that data, asking the question, is there a drug target potentially within the data that we could go after involved in both T cell activation and VEGF? And using multiple different pathway analysis tools, they all triangulated on this PI3 kinase AKT-mTOR signaling pathway as being a candidate that could be involved in what was happening in my samples. Fortunately, there is a very straightforward experiment you can do to ask, is mTOR active in your tissue? And so I felt that at this stage, we needed to do target validation. And so we went to lymph node tissue, and this is a lymph node of a normal person, to ask the question, is mTOR active in my cells? And so in this normal lymph node, brown is positive for mTOR activation, and blue would be background negative staining. And you can see in a normal lymph node, there's some mTOR activation, low level, but certainly some. And then if you look at my lymph node, you can see just striking mTOR activation. So with this data, we now are armed to say that mTOR is active, and that maybe targeting the mTOR signaling pathway with an existing drug could maybe keep me alive and I could make it to my wedding date. Fortunately, there's a drug called sirolimus that was developed 25 years ago. It's a potent mTOR inhibitor that we decided to try on me as the first patient ever with Castleman disease to be given sirolimus. Now, in my first 3.5 years after diagnosis, I nearly died 5 times with multi-organ failure due to my disease. But since starting sirolimus, it's now been 69.94 months since my last relapse. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been 69.94 months since my last relapse, but I know that I can't round up. I don't know if I'm going to relapse tomorrow, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to 70 months. But I also refuse to round down because my colleagues and I worked really hard for that 0.94 months, and we're continuing to work hard for other patients just like me. The New York Times described this as Dr. Cure Thyself a couple years ago, which I think is a bit of an overstatement. I think it should probably say Doctor helping himself a little bit right now and hopefully for a lot longer, but I don't think that would fit on the headline. But importantly, during this time, I made it to May 24th, 2014. I got married to my wife, Caitlin, and 14 months ago, we had our beautiful daughter, Amelia. Thank you. Amelia brings us so much joy. I started out chasing my cure so that I could live. Now I'm chasing my cure so I can watch my daughter live and grow up.